It's a pleasure to have you here to see our school. This is Hatfield Montessori Preschool, and I am very happy to be able to show you around. I am Sean Ellis, and I'm going to be your guide as we go around looking at various things at school. I'm a trained Montessori guide. I'm also a Montessori parent, although my children are all grown up now. And I'm now a Montessori grandparent. I'm very proud to be that. So the outline of what I'd like to show you today is, first of all, the school, which will include something about the community and the history and the activities and our care about COVID-19, and then a little bit about the program. This is the principal, Heather Napier, and she has been a team member for 10 years. She first came to the school as a Montessori parent, then she trained and joined the staff. And these are the other staff members: Hanali Mini, who's also a trained Montessori guide, and Malebo Matlala, who's a teaching assistant and is studying a Montessori assistance course. Then there's Alan Reynolds, who's the gardening teacher. He only comes in one day a week and he teaches the children gardening. Louise Hare is the newest member of the team. She's just finishing off her Montessori diploma and is currently the after-school supervisor. So she comes in at midday and she's there for the afternoon. And then there's Kate Masanaba, who's our general school helper, and she prepares the food for the children. And you'll often find a child popping into the kitchen to say, "Kate, what's for lunch today?" They seem to really enjoy her food. The school is a member of the South African Montessori Association, and some years ago, Sama produced a series of videos showing various aspects of Montessori education, and we were very happy to be chosen as a school where some of the filming was done. Today we're going to be discussing the role of the adult guide in the Montessori environment. I'm Sean Ellis and I'm from Hatfield Montessori Preschool in Pretoria.
My name is Monica from Live in Montessori, Johannesburg. Traditionally, in the Montessori education, we look at three primary elements which make up a Montessori school. These three elements are the child, the prepared environment, and the Montessori guide.
The role of the Montessori guide is very different to that of a teacher in a traditional classroom. His or her role is to be, just as the name suggests, a guide, facilitating learning through actively preparing the environment, actively engaging the child and connecting to that environment, and then becoming passive as the child takes responsibility for their own learning. The Montessori guide is the dynamic link between the child and the prepared environment.
Dr. Montessori emphasized that our care of the child should be governed, not by the desire to make him learn things, but by the endeavor always to keep burning within him that light which is called intelligence. The guide in the Montessori environment exhibits and applies the principles of Montessori pedagogy through a disposition of respect and patience towards the child.
Through an ability to balance the principle of non-intervention, while at the same time not abandoning the child.
Through a trust in Montessori principles, methodology, and pedagogical aims.
Through seeing the role of the adult as primarily observer, scientist, and interpreter of the environment, rather than as a teacher in the conventional sense.
And through guiding the child to normalization and development appropriate to each plane of development.
Dr. Montessori used the terms normal and normalization to describe a unique process she observed in child development. Montessori observed that when children are allowed freedom in an environment suited to their needs, they blossom.
The Montessori guide helps the child to connect to the materials through presentations. The adult in a Montessori environment does not teach in the traditional sense. Rather, she shows the child how to use the various objects and then leaves them free to explore and experiment. This act of showing is called a presentation.
To be effective, it must be done slowly and exactly, step by step, and with a minimum of words.
Another very important part of a Montessori guide's work is observation. Once the child has received a presentation and is left to explore and experiment, the guide becomes passive to the child, but active in her observation of how the child is engaging with the materials and work. He becomes more of a scientist, observing, reflecting, recording, and then using this information to guide the child to the next step. Through careful observation and planning, Montessori guides remain constantly alert to the direction each child is heading and actively works to help them succeed.
Montessori guides respect and protect the child's independence and are supportive and encouraging without the use of rewards or punishment. They facilitate effective communication and are peace educators, constantly working to teach courteous behaviors and pro-social conflict resolution skills. Montessori guides undergo specialized training, which includes a significant focus on their own spiritual preparation in order to best meet their needs of the children within the classroom.
Training is often over 2 or 3 years for each developmental level they work with, and learning is ongoing. The work of understanding human development is never complete for the Montessori guide, and ongoing professional development is a necessity.
What makes someone a successful Montessori guide? In the words of Dr. Montessori, what really makes a teacher is love for the human child, for it is love that transforms the social duty of the educator into the higher consciousness of a mission. Look for a Sama Montessori member school today.
The school was begun in 1986, and that first year we only had 9 children enrolled, so I was working on my own with them, and this is the little group as they were in 1986. By 1987, the school had grown to the level where I needed an assistant, and Les Blandy joined me, and I think right from the beginning our aim was to have the children happy and to have them all progressing. Today, the school can accommodate 40 children, and we have more directresses or guides, whichever term you prefer, for the teachers. And then I'd like to show you a few of the activities that occur at the preschool. There are a lot of activities outside and inside because we believe that the outdoor environment is as important as the indoor environment. In the indoors, there are some of the typical exercises using equipment, which was designed by Dr. Montessori, such as that little girl is using down in the right in the middle. Those are the cylinder blocks, which is a size grading exercise. And she has the block to help her get the blocks in the correct order. Most of the equipment in the Montessori school aims to have a self-correction built into the material so that it doesn't depend on the teacher going and correcting the child. The child can see for themselves if they've got it correct. The other little boy is working with a Montessori map where each continent has been cut out so that he can feel the shape of the continent and find its place on the control map where the name is written. Then up at the top, we have a child who's working with nomenclature cards. There are lots of sets of these which take some item, and then by isolating the different parts of it with a color, the child can learn what the different parts of it are. So there's, for example, ones on snails and fishes and just about anything you can think of, because children at this age are very open to learning language. And they pick up this scientific terminology very, very easily without any effort to learn it as we have to do when we're older. And then the other child is polishing silver. A lot of the exercises in the practical life area are aimed at developing hand coordination and also allowing the child to know how things work in the Montessori school. So when they're finished, they must return the set of materials to the shelf in a condition ready for the next child. So in this case, it would mean going and getting a new little polishing cloth and putting that in the basket and putting it all back on the shelf, and then discarding the dirty cloth into the washing basket and the newspaper for recycling. This is also a picture in the practical life area where the child is pouring water. This is one of the more advanced pouring exercises. We start with pouring just beans or something which is quite big and easy to pour. And if it does spill, it's easy to clean it up. And then as they progress, they go on to working with liquids. And in this case, the bottles, although you can't see it in this photograph, are actually marked with lines, and the child learns to pour and then stop at the correct level when the level of the water is at the line. These children are working with the constructive triangles, and the constructive triangles are an exercise for showing them how geometric shapes can be made up from triangles. There's another child also working with a different set of the constructive triangles. In this set, there are just 2 that need to be put together each time, and they have a black line which helps the child to align them correctly so that they can see that the same 2 triangles can make different shapes if different sides are put together. This little boy is working with the insets for design, which is a pencil control exercise and also helps with learning design. So there are various metal shapes which they use to draw outlines, and then they fill that in with pencil lines. Here are some more examples of activities that happen inside. Up in the left-hand corner, the children are doing a cutting exercise where they're cutting little squares and then gluing them onto paper. And then we have the child working again with nomenclature, with the parts of a fish, so that they become aware that it's not just a fish. The fish has parts just as we have parts, a head, in the case of the fish, a head and a tail and fins and so on. And then the right-hand top picture is of a little girl looking at the wall display, which deals with peace. So we talk to them a lot about the different peacemakers, and peace is a very central part of the Montessori system, because we want the children to learn how to get on with each other. So we do a lot of grace and courtesy exercises, they are called, where we actually teach them how to greet somebody, how to move out of the way if somebody needs to get past you, and how to get on in society. Because first of all, if we want peace, we need to have respect for each other and for ourselves. And so this is very central to what is done at the school. The child at the bottom is just cutting some Play-Doh, which again is building up hand coordination, eye-hand coordination, and allowing the child to develop fully in that respect. This little girl has been having fun with the long rods, or the red rods as they're called. This is again a size grading exercise, but working on the lengths. And first of all, they merely grade the rods, but what the children enjoy doing is, once they've learned to grade them, is to build them into what they call a spider web, and then walk in very, very carefully to the center of the spider web and stand there with a big grin on their face. This little girl is working with the trinomial cube. Now that's the algebraic expression a plus b plus c cubed. But at this first level, the children work with this more like a puzzle, where they are sensorially putting the different pieces together to make a cube. But as they work with this, they eventually are able to start naming those blocks and saying that this is an a cubed, and this is an a squared b, and this is an a squared c, and so on. And it's really quite remarkable to watch that progression from working first with the concrete to then being able to give the abstract names to that. And this is one of the exercises to do with maths. This child has laid out the cards and the counters of quantities up to 10, And because of the arrangement of the counters, it's very easy for them to see the odds and evens. And so then they make a little book, their odd and even book, which they're usually very proud about. And this child is also doing a more advanced exercise where they have already learnt the letters phonetically, and they begin to do spelling using what's called the movable alphabet, where they can say the word, hear a sound, and select that letter from the box. We also put quite a lot of accent on celebrating any festivals that any of the children at school may be having. So, for example, when it's Diwali, we would ask one of the Hindu parents to come in and explain to the children what happens at Diwali, and we can all then join in the fun of that, and at the same time appreciate other cultures and what their special festivals are. We've had a lot of fun through the years learning about a lot of different festivals. In a Montessori school, there's also a lot of accent on care of nature and care of animals. And at the moment at the school, we have guinea pigs and fish, and once a year we have silkworms. So the children are taught how to feed them and what to feed them and how much to feed them and how often to feed them. This little boy is just enjoying some of the silkworms that have come out of the eggs. And for some of them, that's a new experience, actually allowing a silkworm to crawl on their hand. And it takes a little bit of courage sometimes when they've been really discouraged from touching any live insect. Then in the outdoors, the children have a lot of fun besides doing a lot of learning. I think inside they have a lot of fun too, but outside it becomes very obvious, and it's really a time when they can learn to get on with each other, socialize, and do all kinds of activities. So there's climbing, there's digging in the dirt, and that's where we have the painting easel and allow them to do whatever painting they like without any direction. Well, I mean, they're shown how to use the paintbrush, but they're not told what to paint. And that is where we have our vegetable garden. And as I said, Alan comes in one day a week and he teaches them about gardening. But besides that, he also has to do a lot of other teaching due to questions about how the things grow, what is necessary. And that is our little harvest of sweet corn that we had one year. This little girl is learning about planting flowers. And we also have a magnificent mulberry tree, which the children really enjoy. They're forever climbing the mulberry tree. And once a year, we get to making mulberry jam. This has to be a group effort where everybody picks and cleans the mulberries, cuts off the stalks, and then if there's been a big enough harvest, they're all able to take a little pot of mulberry jam home with them. The outside's also a wonderful place for nature exploration and the wonder of finding all kinds of live creatures outside and learning about them. So we can link that up with the materials inside, and that's where this total environment comes in, the outdoors and the indoors. Just a few more pictures of the outdoor environment, climbing on jungle gyms, climbing on trees, and doing all kinds of activities, learning to dig, learning to just play in the mud, and having a lot of fun. So, as I said, there's a lot of possibility for gross motor development. They've got jungle gyms, they've got trees, and a climbing wall, which they shimmy up at a great speed. So the basis of the Montessori program is that we follow the child. We don't have a curriculum which every child will follow in a certain order altogether. Each child is followed individually, and they have their own program. So there's a definite order to it, but it's not done on a whole school basis. Each child follows their own self-directed learning, and we recognize the child's natural development, and we make sure that we introduce material which is correct for them at that moment in their life. This depends on having an authentic Montessori environment where things are set up according to children's development. I think it's always quite interesting to realize that it was Dr. Montessori who brought in the idea of small tables and chairs. Prior to her work, children had to sit at high tables on high chairs, which is not ideal for them to be independent. But she brought in this idea of having it all scaled down to the size of the children. And she also brought in the idea of these specifically designed materials which have a built-in correction, so that it's not necessary for the teacher to say, oh, you're doing that wrong. The child can see for themselves whether they have achieved it, and that gives them a great sense of inner satisfaction. If a teacher sees that a child is repeatedly doing it incorrectly, she may represent the material so that they see how it should be done correctly, but she doesn't actually correct the child whilst they're working with it. And I also mentioned that the Peace program is very integral to the whole program. And this is sort of the area that we have all the displays of various peacemakers, and we will deal with various peacemakers at various times of the year and talk to them about what that specific person did. There's also a table where children can come if they're having a problem with a friend, and then they can choose whether they're going to each put on a puppet and let the puppet explain to the other one why they're upset and what they would like to see as a way of correcting the problem. Or they could use the peace rose, which is passed from one child to the other, so that only one speaks. Only the child holding the peace rose speaks, and the other one keeps quiet and listens. In the beginning, the teacher needs to be there to act as an intercessor, but as they progress, they are able to do this on their own. Then we have a multi-age class. This means that the older children are able to show the younger ones, and the younger ones often go on a walk around the school, which Dr. Montessori called an intellectual walk, where they walk and they observe what the older ones are doing, so they learn from them. We're also very aware, just from a practical point of view, very aware of security at the school. So we have good fences, and once the children are inside, the gate is locked and no one else is allowed to just wander into the school. We also now, because of COVID-19, have had to bring in various health procedures. So when the children arrive in the morning, there's a screening table where the parent must complete a form, and the children are temperatured. And then during the day, there are various protocols to try and keep the children as socially distanced as possible. So as you'll see, some of the basins have been taped over so that they're not standing right next to each other, but can go and wash their hands independently. So I'd love to hear that you want to join us. And if you do, please send an email to info@hatfieldmontessori.co.za. Thank you for coming on the tour. Bye.